Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Accuracy in America. I am your host, Don Irvine, joined by my co-host, Brian McNichol.
Hello, deplorables, dregs, despicables, chumps, Neanderthals, semi-fascists, and of course those dog-faced pony soldiers.
That's right. We'll have to keep extending that as we get more things out there.
There are more coming down the pipe. They're getting angry over there.
We'll probably pick up a few more during this campaign, right?
Yeah, that's right.
They run out of room. All right, so I tend to go into the weather a little bit, and you watch this stuff. You're big on all the kind of taking apart all the climate change people and everything like that. So, my wife and I were talking about all these floods going up in the Northeast and just the heat wave that we have talked about before that we hit through the South and all this stuff. And, you look at this stuff and then, what mentioned last week in terms of, the hottest average global temperature for a couple of days in a row and things like that. I did see that Steve Malloy had tried to debunk that in the Wall Street Journal the other day. But, I guess, our general reaction to this, at least at home, was just that, for meteorologists and other weather people, they almost have to tie this into climate change. Otherwise, they'd probably be laughed out of existence, because that's kind of the thing now, right? It's like any of these mass weather events, it's like, oh, this is all global warming, climate change, right?
Right. The actual scientists, the thing that they talk about the most is do not try to link individual weather events to big global trends, right? Because it's almost impossible to prove. Like for instance, there was a heat wave out in the South and the West. And we were out there. We were in it. I was out there. We went to a baseball game in Wichita, and it was the high that day in Wichita was 110 degrees. It was 101 at first pitch. It's dry heat. It really is. But by the end of the game, it was pleasant. But the heat wave is over there. One of my friends in Shreveport, posted a picture of him sitting in his boat, and I'm like, man, it looks very hot there, and he's like, actually, it's 72 degrees, and it's quite pleasant. So the heat wave is gone. You got to remember. So you didn't hear those guys saying, oh, we don't really have global warming last winter, when Russia, China, and the mainland U.S. all recorded their lowest temperatures ever, right? They don't talk about that. So what they do is they've changed from talking about global warming to talking about climate change. So anything that happens, they can attribute to, carbon in the air and whatnot. What all carbon in the air is doing is making plants grow, making farmland more efficient, making it easier to feed the world population, right? And it carries in it the seeds of, more photosynthesis, more plants is going to equal more rain, right? So, these things take care of themselves, and we know that, but you don't get a big intervention, from Congress to spend a lot of tax dollars ameliorating natural things. You get it ameliorating made up crises.
Yeah, and I mean, what's happening up there in Vermont and things like that, it's like a 1 in 1,000 year event. But the reporting, is as if this is the beginning of a trend, and you can expect this, all the time.
Right, and they say that all the time, and then the trend never develops. Remember, we were going to have hurricanes all the time. We were going to have no snow. Remember, the U.S. was not going to have snow by 2005. Right, there was snow last winter. It wasn't much here. It was all over. And while, the other part of the thing, while it's been hot out in the West and the South and so forth, it's been historically cool on the East Coast, right? So is that explained by global warming or what? What's the cause of the cooling? Why is it so cool over here, right? They can't explain that. They won't talk about it. They go to, extreme weather happens. It happens. Everybody gets a flood every once in a while, right? Everybody gets flooded every once in a while. And, their explanation of it is, global warming every time. And it's not true. It's like hurricane season, where we've had one named tropical event that stayed way out in the ocean, right? We're halfway through hurricane season now. If it's global warming supposed to be causing, hurricanes every 10 minutes, where are all our hurricanes, right? Yeah, that's right. That's right. Bob's right. Just keep making up new words to make it sound bad when you don't you don't have, you don't have a case, right? There's no case. There's no urgent thing that we need to be breaking down society and spending billions of dollars to stall.
Right. And, when you talk about things like hurricanes, is that, we were given those dire warnings that, they were just going to increase, and then it didn't happen, as you kind of alluded to, but we don't hear about that, right? It's like that
tornadoes, same thing. We're going to have F5s every 10 minutes. Where's all our F5s? Hasn't happened.
Right. But you can't talk about that, because then that debunks your argument that you've been trying to scaremonger everybody into thinking that this planet is basically getting to an inhabitable level, and we've got a crisis that we've got to solve, and we've got to electrify everything. We got to get rid of internal combustion engines. We can't have fossil fuels, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The fireworks. We want drones, not fireworks, because that contributes to air pollution and also global warming and, yada, yada, yada. I mean, I don't know, this list is just getting longer and longer about what they're putting on the list of, you can't do this and you can't do that.
Right. That's right. And it's not, you don't get anything out of it. It doesn't make any sense.
And we do want to welcome Bob back. We have missed you. Hope it's not too hot where you are. So we've now passed the 500-day mark with this Ukraine war, this Russian war in Ukraine, and Biden's he's okayed the cluster bombs, which he's taken some flack from some Democrats for that. But we also have this issue. It's like Ukraine is getting a little short on ammunitions, and so are we. And I guess we're trying to take some steps to ramp this up a little bit, but I don't know. I think we should have been a little bit better prepared too, on the other hand.
Yeah. And, the thing about the cluster bombs is we're going to fight to win. The Russians are doing it. They're putting cluster bombs out there. They're doing everything they can to wreak maximum damage and havoc. So if we're going to get in there and fight them, we should get in there and do our best to help Ukraine win.
Yeah, the interesting thing was, I think it was the Journal that pointed out, like, with the Russian cluster bombs, their dud rate is about 40%. So having those bombs on the little bomblets on the ground could be potentially dangerous, for a lot of people. Right.
It's going to be a big cleanup there.
Whereas ours are coming in at 2.35%. So the chances are, if there is unexploded ordnance, it's not going to explode. It's really not that dangerous. You still ought to get rid of it, but the likelihood that something would happen is not as great with the ordnance that we're dropping. I mean, it's effective. Basically, we're saying, like, when we drop a cluster bomb, it's going to explode.
Yeah, there's a park near here called Nike Park, and it's right over in Great Falls. Yeah, it's got cooler. But when they built the park, it was the site. It was a Nike missile site during World War II. So they had to go and clean up a bunch of munitions there, and some of them they thought were dead were not dead. So they ended up being a little more exciting than they thought. But now there's a nice baseball, soccer type of place over there, Great Falls.
Yeah, and there's another one over here in Montgomery County, just off of Snowfirst School Road. I mean, there was a Nike missile park. Part of it is actually, I think, a park now. I mean, it's actually owned by the county or whatever. And there's a lot of argument now we're going through about developing it. But I mean, there is ordnance from World War II still sitting around. If you remember, was it Spring Valley down by AU and things like that? They have for years. Every once in a while they uncover stuff.
Yeah, that's right.
That is kind of part of war. I mean, stuff is discovered later on after decades of development, other things happening.
And we had to defend the homeland there in a way that we haven't really since. I mean, we kind of hardened the homeland some after 9/11, but we actually were worried about getting attacked.
Yeah. So Biden had took a trip. Went over to Vilnius and having this big NATO meeting. He didn't exactly back, Ukraine's admission into NATO. I mean, he didn't give a full-throated defense of this. So Zelensky is not really happy that things aren't moving a little bit faster. On the other hand, it looks like Turkey has assented to giving Sweden a nod. So progress is being made. I don't know. Is Zelensky a little impatient, or was NATO still just kind of being a little, just tiptoeing a little bit around this, or what?
Well, Ukraine was invited to join before and put the brakes on it, right? And now, it's like you don't get to buy car insurance after you have the wreck, right? You got to get your right. And so that's basically what they're trying to do, is buy car insurance after the wreck. And so no, we should not be putting them into NATO right now. We're doing what we're doing to defend them, but NATO, that's a whole other class of obligations that we didn't sign up for, and that people did not go into it, thinking that they would get. So it's kind of bait and switch to get into it, and that's not the right move right now.
So, I mean, how much longer? I mean, do you think Ukraine will get in, or is it going to take the end of the war to make this happen?
I think after the end of the war, it'll be one of the post-war reforms, so to speak.
So, I mean, are you then predicting or seeing that Ukraine is going to be able to get through the slog and basically wind up on top? That Putin is can only throw so many resources at it before even he runs into issues. I mean,
I think they're already running into issues, and I think Ukraine's going to end up with most of its country, and if not all, but definitely most intact, and the Russians are going to have to leave.
That would be good. I think the world is tiring of this whole thing.
And they don't really understand, even the people that are not on our side about this don't understand like what's right and virtuous about Russia's side. That we never really get, he made this case early about the people wanting to be in Russia and whatnot. But the Rus, I guess, started there, the whole notion of Russian greatness or whatever. Yeah, that's right. That's true. It's against the charter to let somebody in who's already fighting the war. So, so you can't really do that, right? So, but yeah, I think Biden's right on this one. I think that, we shouldn't let him in. He may be holding out for a higher price, knowing Biden, but I think we're on the right track on that. If all the people around it are in, it kind of limits Putin's options, right? He can't expand this anywhere else without then bringing the wrath of NATO down on him.
Yeah, and this is for any detractors out there on conservatives, that this is where a lot of us will admit that, I mean, Biden has done pretty much the right thing when it comes to Ukraine. He has been supportive of that, whereas we have a lot of Republicans in Congress who are still railing about the money spent and all some other things that are going on there. And I don't know, we're not here saying that Zelensky is lily pure, but the alternative is,
or that there should be a blank check.
Yeah.
Right. This doesn't go on forever, and we don't spend our whole treasury on it. But you're right. There's, this is one where we're on the right side of history here. You're blocking Russian aggression, blocking one country taking over another. That's something America's always done and always should do. That's why we're the beacon of freedom.
So we also have Janet Yellen took a trip to China. It's like, what's with the exactly? What's with this administration in China? I mean,
well, they're going over there trying to get pats on the head, basically, right? Please don't hurt us. Please, we won't hurt you. We'll stop doing anything you find bad. It's really like a servant relationship, right? We're really getting clocked on China. It's like, that's one thing Biden has not been good on, is we had leverage on him, and now they have leverage on us. They're probably paying him more than we're paying him. And so he kind of has to do what they want done, and that's what he's doing. He sent the Secretary of State, who went over there and promised that we won't defend Taiwan. He sent the Secretary of Treasury to promise that we'll remove tariffs and quit insisting on them not stealing our intellectual property. I mean, we're completely subservient to China because Biden himself and his family are compromised.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to go down that rabbit hole kind of thing like that, is that you could speculate, that the Biden administration's treatment of China is tied to something that what does China have on Biden? That this is like, be nice and we will do what you want us to do, because there
Right.
might be something out there. I'm not going to go down there, but it's just interesting the way that this is all played out.
I think it would be better to not have that, right? I think it would be better to. I wish I knew how to mute. I got a new phone and I don't know how to mute it, so I'm doing my best over here. Uh, but so we were talking about Biden. Yeah, he's in a subservient position. So everything that comes up is going to happen in that vein. It's going to be viewed in that vein.
Yeah, I mean, we're supposed to be strong and defend Taiwan and the interest there. Instead, we've been pretty soft.
Cashed out, right? Do what you want. I'm trying to figure out at this point what is keeping China from moving on on Taiwan. It could be that they realize that would hurt Biden in the election, and they want to keep their stoolie on the throne, right, instead of Trump, right, who rightfully and very effectively opposed them. Whatever you think of Trump, one of the best things he did was put China in its place.
Right. And also North Korea, he kept them at bay.
Yes.
North Korea is now firing off some ICBMs. They claiming that U.S. airplane violated some airspace and things like that. But this is North Korea being North Korea without Donald Trump in the White House. That's
right. He gets no credit for that. Trump gets no credit. Oh, he got nothing out of those summits. It's like he had a summit. He talked to the guy. We never talked to the guy before, right? He got him to stop doing anything that we didn't like him doing, right? He stopped shooting missiles. He stopped provoking his side of the world. He was ready to talk about a number of things, including development on his side of the border that, would open it up to Western forces and whatnot. But no one else has done that. No one else had any in my imagination. Yeah, that's right. But Kerry is headed over there to promise that we'll do whatever on climate change, so they don't have to, right? Because the Chinese are still opening a new coal-fired plant every week, right? They're opening about 50 a year, and so sometimes I read the other day it's 100 a year. I don't know about that. But China is still in the process of moving from an agrarian economy to an urban economy, and it's happening in extremely rapid fashion. And it being China, it involves a ton more people than we've ever tried to reckon with here, right? So their need for energy, their need for TVs and cell phones and all the luxuries of Western society is exploding. They cannot afford to turn off sources of energy right now or play these stupid global warming games, right? So what Kerry is going to hear is y'all can go sacrifice however much of your economy to this pipe dream that you want, but we're not going to join you.
Right. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, it's like it's known that China and also India, I mean, they spew out a lot of emissions, but they're not going to bow down to all these climate people and say you've got to do this. They're building their country, they're growing their industries and things like that, and it requires certain things, and so they're not going to do that. Whereas our guys is like, oh yeah, you want us to do this? We'll get rid of gas powered cars between 2035 and 2050. We'll electrify America. We'll force people to do all this stuff. It's like it does seem that almost every day or every other day or whatever that we hear some industry in America that is working to reduce their emissions, like the cruise ship industry is trying to figure out the shipping industry itself, the ones that where the big containers come over from overseas. They're working on something there, and I have a hard time wrapping my head around kind of really electrifying things that are that big, that require that go that distance and stuff like that, that how this is really, really going to work in the long run. I mean, it's been a slow go for just the big rigs, the trucks they've been trying to build and put out there. It's like, how do you get these long haul truckers with an EV exactly where's their point? How much time do they have to spend recharging and all these things? How far can they go? I just, but these are these inconvenient, truths that the people that are pushing this, they don't want to talk about that.
Right. If you could make every car in America electric today, right? Every gas car was wiped off the road and replaced with an electric one. We'd need a third more energy to fuel those cars. A third more fossil fuel energy to fuel those cars, because the renewable energy now is only about 8 or 9%, and that's only because of massive government subsidies. So you would have to make up all that and a third more to switch to cars. That's not all the other stuff. That's not trucks. That's not buses. That's just cars. So it's a pipe dream. The math doesn't work, and then no one will listen. No one will pay attention to the fact that what they're asking of us is not possible.
Yeah, I think it may have been the Journal somewhere. There was an article about somebody who was he explored putting a wind turbine in their backyard, kind of a thing like that. Talk to the companies that make this equipment, and experts and things like that, and realize is like, well, first of all, if you're going to do the standard thing that you could put towards a home, you need a decent amount of property to be able to do that, because it takes up a lot of space.
Right.
And
dead birds in the yard.
Your electricity rates have to be high enough to justify that, to be able to have it offset by wind energy, because wind, you'd have to spend a lot more money to get the kind of turbine that actually produces a decent amount of electricity in terms of its efficiency. But then also just the zoning regulations, it's like, do your neighbors want to see this big honking thing in your backyard? No. You can actually get smaller ones for the home, but the thing there is that they're not going to produce they'll produce almost nothing,
right,
in that vein too. So these
that's
are
on our vacation. Like it was very hot out there, right? Peak need for power, right? As we're driving through there. And of course, out that part of the country, there's a lot of big, massive wind farms. And those big things are not turning at all. They're like,
yeah, it moves really slowly. You kind of envision that it would move a little faster, but they move really slowly. And you're like, I don't know how you could ever,
you're not creating energy like that, bro.
Yeah. Wind and solar are, it's fine in certain parts of the country, and it probably is a good thing for those that can do it. But this is not your big fix. This is you don't turn your country around and say, get rid of all fossil fuels and we're going all wind and solar and everything like that.
Right.
It's not going to work.
It's not going to work. It is beyond impossible, and they won't admit it. Right? They're driving us into this ditch, saying, "Hey, we'll just figure it out when we get there." We don't have to do that. We don't have to be in the ditch. Right? The things they're saying are forcing us into the ditch are not true, right? Solar, you have some, like you have them on your house, right? Solar panel, right? So there's some limited applications there to power a little space with a few. You can make it work with solar, right, in a way that you really can't with wind. Wind is the biggest of the boondoggles of all green energy. It's by far, it's worse than solar. And it's worse than these other things that they come up with. The wind is, it would not make it without massive government subsidies, and it is far from being, something we can use on a practical basis.
Right, and that's the thing about this alternative energy. This alternative energy industry is all built on the backs of taxpayers.
Yeah,
it's all the subsidies that got them up and running. And I've said time and time again. This is part of the brilliance of Elon Musk, is that he understood this and he took advantage of it, and he basically built, he's built companies around that. Basically Elon Musk doesn't want to start a company unless there's some government money coming his way.
Well,
right?
I think what he has surmised is that government doesn't really know what things should cost, right? So they overpay for things, right? The $5,000 toilet seats and so forth, right? So he's like, I'm getting into these businesses where they don't know what things cost. And so, when they're just blowing cash at stuff, they're blowing cash at me. Right. And so that's what he's done. And it's really a brilliant strategy. Like we're spending more money we're giving more money to Elon Musk now for space travel than we're giving to NASA. The private is now gets more money than the public operation there. So I mean, he's sucked it up. He's sucked up a lot of the solar money. He's the subsidies for his electric cars. It's just massive, right? He's figured out what we're suckers about, and he's taken us. He's treating us like you should treat a sucker.
Yeah, and we've got auto manufacturers that are now saying we're going to use the Tesla standard for charging because that'll give us access to our cars access to a network, that's superior to anything that's out there. The only problem will be is that if all these car manufacturers they start producing all these EVs with the Tesla charger on it, Elon Musk has not built, he didn't build Tesla charging stations and systems out there to handle more than what they thought they could produce and handle through Tesla. Now he's going to have to rethink and say, okay, I am now going to have potentially tens of thousands of more cars that are going to look for juice at our areas that were not in the pipeline when we planned these out. Now, it may wind up giving him the money to help build those things, and he may be able to build those faster than Biden's Charge America thing and all this kind of stuff, because all those other non-Tesla charging stations, for the most part, they don't work real well. They're not well maintained. They malfunction. People go to them and they can't, they try to use an app and it doesn't work. And there's nobody, it's not like somebody's going to come in 2 hours or less and service the unit so you can charge your car. Lots of issues for which, once again, the environmentalists, all the EV forces just, ignore that there are lots of logistical and other issues on the ground that make this unworkable at this point in time overall for mass adoption. You cannot make the whole country force them into EVs. It's not going to work.
This is why government should not be playing in these things. Like, for instance, we were talking about wind energy, right? 1 year, the Republicans managed to get the wind production tax credit canceled 1 year before it was restored by the Democrats. In that 1 year, private investment in wind energy decreased by 92%. In other words, almost all the money disappeared when it wasn't being supplemented by government money, right? So they're doing what they're little Elons. They're there to suck up government subsidies. So government doesn't need to pick the winners and losers here. Their track record is awful and their causes are misguided.
Yeah. I mean, as I recall, I think, the late T. Boone Pickens, he's an oil man, but he set up a big wind, turbine operation, right, I think, through Oklahoma. Now, on the surface, probably not a dumb thing to do because there's a lot of wind in Oklahoma.
Yeah, in West Texas, Texas Panhandle.
I'm sure there was some government money involved too. That T. Boone didn't get rich, just with. I mean, he was a smart guy, but I mean, once again, I think the government's encouraging you to do things. It's like, okay, I can do this and I can probably still make money off of it. And that's fine. I don't know whatever happened to that whole operation afterwards.
There's a ton of them. There's a big wind farm like around Amarillo and, Texas Panhandle, Oklahoma, a lot of Oklahoma, the Indian tribes make money off of it. Right.
That's interesting. All right. So CPI numbers, the official CPI numbers, we get different measures, but this is one that came out today, showed that year over year inflation has cooled to like 3.1%. Now, there's, you and I have talked about this before, just the fallacy and the problems with these numbers. I mean, realistically, who's really feeling? I mean, are you feeling any better because of this? There's still lots of products that are still expensive. I mean, I'm glad that eggs have come down in price. Thank you. I'm glad that some other things have come down in price, but there's plenty of other things that are continuing to go up. They talk about, like food, processed food, which a lot of Americans buy, supply chain and cost issues. They're still running 8-9% a year. So that's not helping Americans at all. And we're also seeing, companies that are laying off people and cutting back hours and things like that. So I think there's kind of almost a little hidden mini recession of some sorts that underscores this economy a little bit, where there are weak points in the economy that a lot of others aren't seeing. And Biden continues to talk about the greatness of Bidenomics, and I'm sure with inflation cooling, he'll find a way to spin the numbers. But once again, we know those numbers are higher than when he took office, even at 3%.
Right. So yeah, when he took over, inflation was 1.4%. So it's still more than twice what it was when he took office. And it's only because there's no more energy in the economy to inflate, right? It's basically, we're basically headed toward survival mode. And unemployment, they add their added jobs was half of what they predicted. The CPI was down. I guess annual growth now they're looking at maybe 2%. Trump had it up over 4 a couple of quarters, right? It was in the high 3s most of his presidency. People don't see these, like I still want somebody to, what policy that Joe enacted do you credit for all the job growth, right? I mean, I guess you could say the massive government spending, but that's not permanent, right? As soon as whatever the government bought is built, those jobs are lost. So, I mean, a lot of ways he's setting it up for the next president to have an even harder time than they already would. But, we're still, average household income is down $1,200 a year under Biden. It was up $5,500 under Trump. It was up $900 over 8 years under Obama. It was up $440 over 8 years under W. So, you're underwater on that. People are making less money. There's less disposable income. Wages have not kept pace with inflation. Retirement accounts have lost a third of their value since Biden's been president. So, I mean, he has done significant damage to the U.S. economy and to people's buying strength. And a lot of their success is because, like, what they put in the inflation indicator is, they change it to the things that help Biden the most, right? Like food's not in there. Food is still going up like 7.9, 8.2% a month, right? Food inflation is still very much a thing. Gas prices are easing back up, which I guess probably has something to do with the summer blend and whatnot. But he's trying to tout this, and they've come out with this campaign, right? And everybody, this Bidenomics, and they've decided, oh, we're just going to pretend it's all good and go float a bunch of stuff out there and see what happens. And so, like, all their little spokesmen are doing it, and I think that maybe it was the New York Times sent somebody to to a barber shop in Philadelphia and said, is Biden helping us? Look at all these figures, he's stabilizing the economy, whatnot. They're like, Biden has done nothing for us. This is not working. This is getting worse. So a lot of their input they're getting from normal Americans is, you're putting on a smokescreen and we're not buying it.
Yeah, and I'll be curious to see what happens when the student loan repayments have to resume. I mean, there's been a lot of
2 months. Yeah, that's in
a lot of
September.
talk about what that could do. I mean, a lot of economists will say, there'll be a big hit to the economy, because of that. And I think there is some truth to that, because the people, at least the media have interviewed, or the responses that I've seen there, it's just like, I'm shocked that we're going to have to repay this, that we're actually going to have to meet our obligations. This one thing that really got me, I get these different podcasts, and one was done by Bloomberg and came out over the weekend on student loan repayment. And they had interviewed a 25-year-old woman who is a teacher now or something. Anyway, she's doing something. And so she's got tens of thousands of dollars of debt. And she said that she was shocked, and her lifestyle will have to change. She's got an aging car, but she may get rid of that when the payments resume, and that maybe that'll be good. But she's going to have to, she's not going to be able to go to the upscale, grocery store and buy the locally sourced food and stuff like that. She didn't set aside any money, for repayments, right? The media, the liberal, the Biden, all these people convinced her that, her debt was basically going to be wiped out and going to go away, and she was going to get off scot-free. So she just readjusted her life and planned a different thing. They interviewed a teacher in Philly who did actually save some money aside just in case, like that. But there are also other people who actually continued to pay, even though there was a pause. They were working on their principle because they weren't sure. I mean, there were definitely plenty of reports about whether or not Biden's scheme was legit, was legal. And,
right.
And so, I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of financial responsibility by a lot of these student loan borrowers are thinking like, oh, the government's going to take care of me again. The Democrats are, they're going to wipe out all or most of my debt and I can move on. And sorry, Charlie, this is not the way it works. I love those memes that people kept posting, Mark safe from Biden's student loan repayment program or something.
Right. And it's like, there's no justification for paying those loans. And they say, oh, you're strangling the economy. It's like, no, you're making those people pay their loans. That's not strangling the economy. The economy's fine. The problem is paying the loans, right? And it's like and he wants to spend. I mean, this was about a $600 billion project, right? And he wanted to do that without getting approval of Congress. That's what the Supreme Court weighed in on. They're like, no, you can't do that without the approval of Congress. So, he did it all wrong. And it's like, they don't really care about democracy, or they don't really care about the processes. They just kind of ram through what they want, and they got called on it. And so now, he's in September when they start getting repaid, and there's no more backstops. There's no more tricks he can play. There's going to be a political falling out. And it's not, they're trying to shift the blame. It's like, they're trying to shift the blame on Tuberville now, right? Senator Tuberville, he won't get out of the way and let their military guys get approved for higher posts because they're spending money, military DOD funds on abortion. So it's all like, oh, it's all Tuberville's fault. These guys don't know where their job's going to be, and the Marine Corps, the first time in 174 years, doesn't have a commander. And, it's like Marine Corps is just fine. If you have a problem with that, tell the president to quit using taxpayer dollars on abortions, right? That's the line he's drawn. You can't get around it. So you're going to have to meet him. You're going to have to take care of it.
Yeah, and they attack him on all kinds of things like that. They are trying to pressure him to release this and move on with that. But he's taken a stand. There's no reason for him to move off of that position at all. And
moral courage in this town, it's like just the weirdest thing. Like people don't know what to do with it. So it's like, people attack it because they can't achieve that themselves. They can't stand up and say, I'm for this because it's morally right, whether it hurts me politically or not.
Yeah, but that's that's one thing that I always have a problem with politicians, is that they won't take those stands, or at least if they do, they start to waffle. And I really prefer the politician on either side stand by the principle, stand by whatever their beliefs are, just stick by them. Don't start kowtowing to their side to win votes. I mean, the student loan thing, there was no doubt this is a Democrat Biden left-wing scheme to buy those younger votes for the election.
Right.
And it's fallen flat on its face. I mean, they're trying to find this other workaround, but it's just so much garbage coming out of this administration when it comes to stuff like this.
And why are you looking for workarounds? The court told you don't do it, so don't do it. Right? They're looking for workarounds on all this stuff, right? And it's like you can't just accept that you're not supposed to do it.
Right. I mean, the left, obviously, after all those Supreme Court decisions, it's back to the packing the court. We've got to do something. We need term limits, blah, blah, blah.
Work around to the court, work around of affirmative action. We're not really going to do that. The judge in Louisiana who told them, the social media people should not be getting orders to censor from government. Quit having those conversations. Quit talking about what all you're going to censor. We got workarounds for that. Yeah, sure they do. They're not going to follow those orders. They don't care about the courts or legitimacy of the American system. They don't care about any of that.
Yeah. I'm going to throw this one up the ladder a little bit more. I'll just move it up. So a judge ruled against the FTC on this Microsoft acquisition of Activision. And that's that's another big hit to Lina. I mean, this FTC has been horrible. This is one of the worst FTC. I mean, it's one thing, it's one thing to to file objections and to say we want to investigate and look at this further, but it seems like almost every merger, every acquisition, and anything that companies are trying to do to improve their operations and improve efficiency, or just consolidate a little bit, this FTC comes in here. Lina Khan is trying to come in there and has tried to undo and break everything up, and they couldn't make a case here. I mean, their arguments were wrong, and the judge called them out on it, rightfully so. But boy, I mean, it's just why does she still have a job?
Yeah, it's awful. It's awful. And they don't. They run roughshod over. They make you spend a lot of money to defend these things, right? And it'd be one thing. It's like rifle shot versus shotgun, right? They're a shotgun approach. If you say merger, they're pow, right? If they would do it with a rifle approach, where you're hitting the ones where there are questions, right? Well, how much market share is involved and so forth, then they'd have something. But when you scream every week, there's antitrust, and that things must be stopped, and it's going to ruin the world, and people see that you're pretty clearly politically driven in almost everything they do. That's the other thing about like the Biden administration. Almost everything it touches is ruinously politicized, right? So you can't trust their judgment on anything because everything is politicized to it. Like the Federal Railroad, the regulators, right? They're what are they, ICC and so forth. They're trying to use all this to get back to 2-3 crew trains after New Palestine, right? It's the same type of deal. It's like you're trying to make help a union. You don't care about the train industry or train safety or fixing the actual problem. You're just make more jobs, right? The same thing with education. They want to just make more jobs. So that's not these are things like we need the kids educated, right? We don't need, it's not a jobs program for teachers. It's not. And that's the whole way they do it. The pipeline people, right? They were going to require, if you had a pipeline carrying fuel, right, carrying greenhouse gases, that every so often along that spot you stop and do it. Wherever the pipeline traverses, you have to do it environmental impact statement every so many miles down the road. Okay, it's flowing under the ground, right? It's well underground, but you have to every few miles say this is what this pipe well underground would do, and you have to study it and buy engineers, and right, it takes a lot of money to put these things together and time and so forth. It basically would mean no pipelines for transmitting fuel in the U.S., right? But they don't care because ideologically, they're set on this, global warming is terrible and it's going to kill us all. And anything we can do to stop it is justified. Right. And so it's ideology over running the country.
Yeah. With Microsoft, I mean, it's like, I'm not some big, pro Microsoft guy per se, and I'm not a gamer. And one of the things about this case was just that, the FTC was like, well, this, Microsoft, it on cloud gaming, they're just going to basically control it all. And yet completely ignoring the fact that they struck a 10-year deal with Nintendo to take on, they could have Call of Duty. They actually opened it up more than any game, company I think has ever done that, to go cross-platform, because that has, a lot of these things are infamous for the fact that you can't do a lot of these things cross-platform on the cloud. And that's the way they kind of control their revenue stream and everything like that. But Microsoft, they went ahead and they're basically saying, we're working on these agreements. We're opening this up so all kinds of people can be able to use this. I mean, it seems to have taken away the central argument of the FTC, but they kept beating this drum, and I'm glad that we finally had a sensible judge to put an end to it. The EU is another case where the EU has their own issues because the EU just likes to muddle everything. Right. But our FTC has just been, one horrid experience after another under the Biden administration.
Yep.
Also, something I wanted to ask you about before we go on to other subjects that I forgot about, which is I wanted your opinion about, Meta and Threads as a competitor to Twitter.
But a bunch of people signed up when it started. People sign up and these things. Here's the thing about it. So Twitter, yeah, that's right. That's right. Twitter is where the game is played on ideal battles of ideals. Meta is an attempt to create a safe space for one side to go sit on the side and talk amongst themselves. That's not, if you're there to fight the battle, then going somewhere where everybody agrees with you is not satisfying, right? So, the conservatives, they have theirs too, right? Truth Social and whatnot, where you can go and only talk to conservatives and only see conservatives and have every thought you have confirmed by your fellow conservatives, right? But the battle is still fought on Twitter. Twitter is still the battleground. Nothing's changed there, and I don't think it will.
Yeah, so it's been interesting to see how this. I mean, timing wise, I mean it was probably a perfect time for Meta to launch this, because Elon had just issued the limits on users on how many tweets you could see based on whether or not you were paying or non-paying customer and things like that. So I can't say that I always agree with everything that Elon seems to be finding a way to, limit things and probably whatever value of Twitter was when he bought it, which you overpaid anyway. It's a fraction of that today for lots of reasons. I looked, I have an Instagram account. I created a Threads account out of curiosity. So Meta made it very easy to create a Threads account, because if you have an Instagram account, you automatically could just follow everybody, that you had on Instagram or whatever. So that gave you this community. Now I've been watching this and doing this, and that, it's, when you're small fry, the average Joe, it's not easy to pick up followers, right? So you have kind of your Instagram hive a little bit that you had, and that's it. And so there seems to be a little bit like, that's it. If I had whatever I don't even know how many people I have following me on Instagram, but I think my Threads is like at 101 or whatever last time I checked a few days ago. So it's a real small group of people and everything like that. And I rarely see, I've been testing different comments. I rarely see any reaction to anything I post on there at all. But I do notice some friends I've had over the years that I haven't had much engagement with on Facebook, and definitely no engagement on Twitter, are definitely spending more time on Threads. Now, you also have this thing that you've probably seen, where it's kind of the wild, wild west. They didn't, they don't have it set where you can just follow, on your timeline, the people you follow. It's like everybody's out there. So, and some things like ESPN, I mean, I got a gazillion threads, from ESPN, because they're very active. For whatever reason, Crumble Cookies has upped its game. It was posting a few things on Instagram because it's a very visual medium and they can post their cookies. But now they're doing a whole bunch of other things. I'm like, holy cow, I've got all this stuff. I don't even have time. I don't know if I want to read or watch all this stuff. So, but if you want to get reaction and engagement, and you want to talk about politics, you want to get the news, you almost have to be on Twitter. Right. I did make a comment that I'm like, when, at what point are the news and the politics? Journalists, they'll go to Threads if they see some value in it, where they can get news tips, they can share news, they can do other things like that. It's not really happening, so far. There's limited political anything on Threads. I kind of made it say it's kind of like having a journal entry. If I ever want to go back, I can say, this is what I was doing at this point in time on that day, yeah. And it's almost like having a private conversation with myself.
Yeah.
So, he's had over 100 million users. At some point in time, there'll be advertising and stuff like that. I'm not really sure it's going to be the Twitter killer that all the people have said it was going to be, because I think it's lacking so many things at this point that, there's still value in Twitter. I mean, they're going to be angry liberals that'll probably go to Threads or whatever, but I think, the debate and other things like that, if you want to talk about a public square, it probably still is on Twitter, if worth anything else.
That's right. Yeah, I agree with that. I think that it's the Twitter will continue to be the one for.
I do think it's funny how
I don't think this is what brings it down. I'm not saying it won't be brought down at some point, but this is not it.
But it's funny how Elon has reacted to that. Some of his things that he said about Zuckerberg and copycatting and all this kind of stuff.
Certain contests he wants to have.
Yeah, he's amusing. He really
he is. He takes it light, and I think that just enrages the left, right? Because they're at the end of the day, they're defined by jealousy and humorlessness, and so his humor just really infuriates them. It's pretty funny.
All right, so let's I've got some political things here in terms of this Iowa caucuses, January 15th. It looks like it'll start for Republicans. Right. So that'll be interesting. So that's still quite a ways away, good 6 months away. DeSantis he's been getting peppered, I guess, with questions about what's wrong with this campaign, after he launched it. So it's now the corporate media that he's blaming these things on and stuff like that. I don't know. I mean, it's still early. I mean, I think sometimes people are looking for more things than you're going to get. I mean, there's a lot of news surrounding Trump, and he's kind of sucks all the air out of the room or whatever. So, good or bad news for Trump, it still seems to help him poll wise. And
well, my thing is I think that they're fine with it being, with them taking Trump away from us, but not like this. I think the problem for conservatives is, we're not going to let you harass someone with sketchy legal garbage out of the race. You're not going to get to choose our candidates, right? And that's what they're attempting to do. And so, I just think that like the what they have done to Trump makes it impossible for any of the other Democrats to break through. I think a lot of Republican voters look at it and say, you're not going to just indict this guy out of the race, right? You're not going to just be able to do this to our candidates, because if you can do it to Trump, you can do it every cycle, right? And so, he's not according, contrary to their fantasies, he's not any more crooked than any other politician. So in a lot of ways, he's less, because he doesn't need money, right? He's not scratching for money because he has all the money that he needs. So, I don't think they're going to get far on that. And, it's the more it goes on, like I read these Twitter conversations, and there's almost always someone in the conversation now who says, you realize they're just harassing Trump because they can't beat him in the next election. And the other person, that's total nonsense. But, that's what this is. Like, a lot of the country has turned on to the idea that they're just going to try to harass him out of the race.
Yeah, I mean, Trump continues to attract big crowds. Short of having the guy actually physically in prison, I don't know what's really going to stop this whole Trump train at this point.
Right, and the thing about it is, if you get out of the way and let the process unfold, right, then something might well stop it. A DeSantis or someone who can say, I was a lot more effective. I didn't sign all Nancy Pelosi's spending bills. I would have fought, against abortion harder than Trump did, and so forth. Now Trump is, he's telling the states, settle for 15 weeks or whatever, right? Okay, that's probably the legislative reality, right? But that's not where conservatives are on this right now. So, he would be defeatable if you would quit trying to indict him out of the race and just allow things to take shape, right?
Yeah.
Then these other candidates could explain. It was like now, there's a lot of talk about DeSantis' campaign not being very good and him not mixing with people well and so forth. But, I think none of that would be a problem if Trump was not being persecuted in the way he is. It's just, you can't get out from under that political reality, right?
Yep. All right. I'll give you the final word here from the last couple minutes.
So one of the things that's going on here, there's her name is Mesha Mainor. the Democrat. She was a Democrat member of the Georgia House of Representatives in a deeply blue district in inner city Atlanta. Changed to the Republicans, and she says it first got her going that way was school choice. But there's a lot of issues that she's like, what have they done for us? I think there's something like 24 people now around the country who have switched from Democrat to Republican in the last 2 years because they've just gotten fed up with it. And this is not like, you can remember like in the early 80s and the mid 80s, Republicans really were a party of ideas. They were bubbling with new ways to do this and that and the other. That's not really the case now, right? Now it's sort of lawfare, and the positions are well known. There's nothing really revolutionary, but people are looking at Democrats are for having sex with the kids and teaching weird stuff in school and not holding schools to account, and Republican and affirmative action and all this. And Republicans are for standing on your own merits and putting schools focused on what they're supposed to be focused on.
All right. Thank you. And then also congratulations to LSU for their draft. Had a very good draft for them.
Well, those guys, one of them's going to come to the Nats. So, in fact, two of them, they got two Nats. So, they got two LSU Tigers. So, we'll look forward to see where they end up in the minors.
Yeah. All right. That's great. Thank you, everyone, once again for joining us today. As always, please stay safe and stay well. Remember, we live in the greatest country in the world, and do not let anybody tell you otherwise. And as always, God bless America, and we will see you again next week.